So often women feel like they have to do more and be more in order to get ahead. But I often find with our clients at SisterSmart that they already have what they need and they just need to learn how to do more with what they've already got. And in fact, we often end up over optimizing on some things and then not giving enough attention to other things. This leads to a lot of excess work and busyness for women, which can actually hold them back from wanting to move forward because they're concerned that if they're so tapped out now, how can they possibly take on more? And this is why I'm so excited to talk to my guest today, April Little, because she helps women with their career strategy so that they're getting the mix right to bring out their full potential. I'm Jill Avey, a career success coach, and this is Sister Smart Leadership, the show that explores how women can rise from director to vice president and beyond by fully leaning into their feminine energy as their biggest advantage. Let's get you one step closer to the recognition and promotion you deserve. April's a career coach for women with over 15 plus years of experience in talent acquisition and human resources. She was previously the VP of HR at a security startup. And as a career coach, April helps women secure promotions into leadership positions. So her expertise has been featured on Harvard Business Review, LinkedIn News, and she also holds a bachelor's and a master's focused on HR and organizational development. So in her role at a Fortune 500 company, she oversaw hundreds of executive promotions and saw the patterns of what it takes to succeed at those highest levels. She uses that experience to teach women the executive mindset, strategic communication, and leadership skills needed to fast track their path to executive roles without all that guesswork. So that's what I love so much about working with a coach. We can save people years of trial and error. April, I've been looking forward to this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me today. I am so excited. You and I have been supporting each other on this platform for the better part of the past 2 years, Jill?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you've been a big inspiration to me.
I'm very excited to talk to you today and have this conversation. And I am looking forward to enriching both of our communities.
Wonderful. So let's take it in broad strokes first. What should women be thinking about as they look up the ladder?
I think that they should be thinking about how they're currently showing up in their internal brand. That is really important. I think that there are things that you already embody today versus, feeling like you need to go get that. And I think that's back to your earlier point, Jill. It's not necessarily a bunch of things that you're going to go out and get. I do think you're going to develop a lot of those skills and they're going to get better. But it's never too early to start embodying those skills now. So I think when you start looking at moving to the future, it's starting to check in with, I call it your 10 steps to building your executive level influence, your mindset. How do you feel about work? What's your approach? Your strategic thinking. Do you know how to zoom in and zoom out? So that's how I teach strategic thinking. Are you a clear communicator? Do you know how to share your governing thought in 3 supporting points and hold a little bit to the vest instead of feeling like you need to share everything? So that way, if someone asks, you can kind of cascade that out like an accordion and continue to center yourself as the power player and the subject matter expert that you are versus giving out too many details. And then you might find yourself on a rabbit hole doing more work than you should be. So I think it's starting to really take a internal look at all the skills that are needed to become an exec and to become a leader and start seeing, where do I meet these qualifications and where don't I? And can I start to develop them now?
That's fantastic. So we talked about communication, strategic thinking, mindset. Let's talk about executive presence for a little bit. What are some of the things that you think of when you're talking about executive presence? Because I feel like that's kind of that fourth thing that we often cover.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the way I cover executive presence is through the 10 steps of building executive level influence. So I describe executive presence to my clients as their internal uniform. So that is essentially, I understand about Jill. So if I'm looking at Jill for a promotion, I know that we're getting ready to give out some really tough news and Jill's going to be able to be pretty even keeled giving that out. I know that I could put Jill in front of anyone in the organization because she's a fantastic communicator. I know that Jill has a certain consistency in how she carries herself. So I'm not going to see a surprise when she comes into the boardroom. I know that she is great at either zooming in tactically or zooming out to connect the dots organizationally with the work that she's doing, that there's a certain level of business acumen. So I describe it more so as embodying a strong consistency and presence to yourself in order to, and showing up as that consistent leader when there's grace under fire, all of those things, right? You can handle conflict well. You have great relationships. You know how to influence using storytelling. So I describe it more so as, can you consistently show up and show up well?
Yeah, you covered that really well. Now, I want to pick on storytelling a little bit
Yeah.
because I think that's an important piece. And that kind of brings us into communication. And leaders have to be telling stories. They have to be bringing people along with their vision. They have to be able to create that vision and then bring people along with it. And they have to tell the story in a way that's going to be consistent when other people tell that story. And so that's no easy thing. How do you think about communication for leaders?
I do think that storytelling starts with sort of audience analysis and the relationships that you have. So you're always appealing to your audience's key care abouts. So when you're telling that story, maybe if you're a leader listening to this right now, it could start as simple as beginning with the end of the story. So beginning with the end and starting. So maybe the goal is to reach a 20% increase in business, but you're going to start off with, imagine a future state of this organization where we're 20% increased in business. We have 80 plus more headcount, and we're operating in a space where we're not contract driven. And then you can take them back through how you're going to get there. So that is what I call really basic storytelling to warm yourself up. But I think it plays a role because just telling the numbers can be very numbing. And it's the story that's going to allow you to influence people in that room to get what you want. And there are many other ways to tell stories. I think that leaders should have 3 back pocket stories at all time to inform, influence, and inspire. Now, when you are looking to influence, that story can change often because you could be leveraging insights from current events with a competitor. There could be different things there, but it is really important to ensure that you always have 3 stories in your back pocket and know when to use them.
I love that. And I love that you're talking about using that story to bring the data to life, because we need to connect with both people's hearts and minds. And so you're really giving us a way, and your example was so good with that, of how we can do that. And then bringing in those current events and things like that to keep yourself relevant, to have those in your back pocket. What are some ways that people can create those back pocket stories? What kinds of topics would they be thinking about if they're thinking about their three back pocket stories?
So I think that some of that could be leveraging historical data from the organization and the function you're in, having a really good vantage point of, I got here today in 2025, but I understand what happened in 2023, and leveraging that story. And that's often really helpful when maybe you're proposing something new to do and you can leverage some insights from something that was either similar that might have had success or did not work as well. There's other places leveraging information from a competitor, staying up to date on current events. Typically, when you're speaking to executives, that is going to be one of their key care abouts. And they're going to want to know that you have a broader view than just the desk that you sit in. The next thing could making sure that you find stories that align, as I said earlier, with the key care abouts. So if the key care about for your leader could be, maybe it's having the best staffing and they don't want attrition. They don't want to see attrition. So that could be sharing some stories of maybe some times that you did that well or what has really worked. Another way to get some really good intel is a lot of women, and I'm saying women in specifically because we tend to keep our heads down at our keyboard, is we miss some of the town hall meetings that happen in the workplace, especially investor calls. That is extremely important for you to go to, so that way you can start to understand the market vantage point of your organization as well. So you can start building up your business acumen around the greater organization to be able to tell more stories too. And being in spaces that aren't necessarily your function. Being in adjacent spaces will also help you become a better storyteller and a rainmaker. as well.
Oh, wow. There's a whole bunch there.
Yeah.
I love that. One of the things that you said that I want to zoom in on is that about knowing your audience. So how do you change how you're talking as you move up the ladder?
That's great. So the way you change how you talk is that sometimes we fall in the trap of talking to everybody the same way. And let me put a pin in that because I do think I often work with women, and Jill, I'm sure you have too, where they're like, April, I'm not really sure how to communicate with executives. And I struggle with that. Well, first, it's remembering that you're not communicating with an exec. If we take the title off, you're communicating with Beverly
Mm-hmm.
first. Now, Beverly cares about certain things. So Beverly is an executive. So as you move up, there are going to be people that you need to zoom in on, and that's going to be maybe your direct chain of command. Your leader, maybe their skip level, want to know enough of the details. So if they have to go in rooms where you're not in those rooms, they're able to recite and share that information confidently. But
Mm-hmm.
as you work away from your skip levels, they have a 30,000 foot view into what you're doing. And so
Mm-hmm.
their goal is just to really get more of a snapshot. So it's sharing more so of a highlight with them, but also being ready to share anything more zoomed in if they have a question. You also can lead in and say, would you like to know more? Because again, they're already dealing with a lot. And so they might just want to highlight versus you giving everything. So it is understanding that some people want more details and some people want less details. And that also helps you to start operating and becoming a strategic operator.
I love that. And combining that with what you just said
Yeah.
about attending the investor calls, things like that, then you can, like, if you're talking to a board member, you can know how much to zoom in or zoom out because you're starting to understand what they care about. And you can have a good guess on, what level they're going to want to be talking to you at.
Yeah. And I will add, I forgot to mention this point, that you can learn more about a person without asking them any questions if you start observing. So if you start observing the spaces that you're in, the way other people maybe answer their questions, either with more or less detail, you start to understand what would satisfy and help move the momentum in the room. And that comes from observation.
Mm-hmm. Because even at the C-suite level, you might
Yeah.
have one member who really likes to dive into the details and is going to ask you a lot more, and then others who don't want to get into that at all, and you
No.
can just tailor that for each person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Land the plane.
love it. So what are some of the ways that we can kind of break through norms that might be in our way as we're wanting to move up?
So I think some of the norms that come in our way is that there's obviously for women, there is the broken rung, as they call it. Typically, a lot of women don't make it past specialist or lead level to break it into leadership. And so it's starting to change your perception and your perspective that just because I don't see myself there doesn't mean I'm not supposed to be the first. That's for any woman listening to this. I think the
Yes.
second is that you don't need to go out and get a bunch of education and certifications. You have everything you need. And I often tell people the best education is available right to you at your company. Your MBA is right there. The way they
Yeah.
like to do things, the way they like strategy done, the way they want the budget managed, the way they want you to public speak, all those things are right in your organization. And you will go so much further than going to enroll into a program to take accounting principles in your MBA when you can just simply start managing a budget and a P&L.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's starting to change your perspective that there's all these new things that you need versus looking at it saying, these are all the things I have and I need to develop them.
I see you're saying, first of all, looking inside to see what you've got
Yeah.
already and developing that,
Yeah.
but also being a great observer and
Yeah.
almost like a journalist where you're learning from your environment rather than just kind of, sometimes we just put our head down and work so hard and we're just moving along and, running projects and doing the things. And we're
Yeah.
not taking that time to learn.
We're not. And in fact, blocking time out on your schedule to do strategic thinking is only going to help you be a better strategist. Strategic thinking doesn't happen while you're working. It happens when you're not working. And it happens when you're blocking time off to actually sit and think about things.
Absolutely. What about the role of mentors in this learning from the organization?
So I actually have a specific way that I love to utilize help resourcing and help in relationships. The first is your sponsors. These should be individuals that carry some degree of influence and they can speak your name in rooms that you're not in. Those individuals tend to be a skip level or higher, because I do think that your sponsor should be separate than your leader. Your leader is a nice bonus, especially if you have a great relationship. But even if you don't have the best relationship with your manager, and not because maybe there's just no great relationship, you just don't maybe align with them fully, but you do a great job, it's always a great opportunity for you to build relationships outside of your manager so you're in control of your career. So that's one. The second is starting to utilize them in a way where you're meeting with them and observing them too. So observation still comes back in, because it's similar to being on LinkedIn, Jill. Looking at someone's profile, sending them immediate DM, and it doesn't get responded to because you didn't take an effort to build a relationship. So it is important to look at even some of those skills where you have a gap. And if you start noticing some of those execs do that really well, whatever that thing is, whether they communicate really well or they're a great visual storyteller, observe that over time, because offering up that observation is going to be a strong connector piece for them to say yes when you ask them to be a sponsor. So that's the first. The second is, I do believe that you can have mentors internally in your organization, but I do find that the higher you climb, the sponsors from your previous organization should become the mentors of the future for you. And I do believe that to keep your executive framing intact and always in mind, your sponsors, you should be using them more so for the internal navigation. And your mentors, maybe there's some workplace dynamics going on or some emotional intelligence things you need to work through. It could be helpful to work with an external person to do that as a mentor or an executive coach.
Yeah. Because there's things you can't talk about at work.
There are things you can't talk about.
Yeah, those things that you're struggling with, you really don't want to be talking about those with mentors and sponsors internally, because then you just look like the person who always has problems.
That is correct. That is correct. And the third relationship is building up a strong peer network, and sometimes in adjacent spaces, because that's another way for you to begin to learn in a more collapsed relationship about other parts of the business so you can learn more.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of times people are hesitant to build these mentor and sponsor. I mean, I think you have to build the mentor relationship first before they can become a sponsor, but maybe they're hesitant. They don't know what to talk to them about, or they don't know how they can make it a reciprocal relationship. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. So when you observe the person, maybe it's over a few months, it's starting that relationship off by pulling them aside and saying, Jill, I have been observing you for the last few months, and I think that you're fantastic at storytelling, both as an orator and as a visual storyteller. And it just so happens I'm interested in getting to know how to do that better with someone through observation and just meeting with them. Would you be open to having 15 or 30-minute touch points with me every month or biweekly? Now, rule of thumb here, the further they are away from you, they probably can't commit to a biweekly cadence. So you might want to opt for monthly. But the closer they are to you, they might be open to a quick 30-minute, because that also fulfills some of their responsibilities as a leader if they're a part of any leadership development programs where they need to mentor. So keep that in mind too. But how you utilize that relationship with the sponsor is maybe starting to bring some work to them, right? Like some of the things that you're thinking about doing and getting their insights on it. Now, let me tell you what happens over time. Your sponsor also has their own day job. And so when you're in a closed door environment or even Zoom one-to-one, it stops being you and sponsor and it starts being you and that person. And you start to change the tide from tutelage and teacher to closed door advisor. And they may start asking for your perspective on things. And that's where you start influencing, and they can really start to see your value as a leader too.
Oh, that's so great. I love it when that can happen.
Yeah.
Often, people who are, further down the ladder feel like there's nothing they could possibly advise somebody that's, further up from them. But yet, when the higher up you get, the harder it is to stay in touch with everything that's really going on the front lines. And so I think that's one, easy thing that we can do, as that
Yeah,
advisor. So,
I
yeah.
agree. I agree.
Yeah. Now, how do you determine like what's feasible? Like, how far can you go in your organization? A lot of times people are wondering like, what's my career path here, and how do I figure out what's even reasonable for me to dream about?
So I am a person that believes that it's okay to have a bit of unhealthy delusion because you're only delusional until it works. So
Yes.
I will say that, is it important to understand if the position that you want exists? Absolutely. I also think it's important, just like going into a mall and maybe you're walking in at the food court and you want to get to Macy's, it's looking at that map saying you're here and let's get here. So it's getting familiar with your company career framework, looking at
Yeah.
where you are and the competencies that are needed for each level to see how can I start embodying that in a way that is sustainable for the work that I also have to do, but also doesn't put me in a position to be exploited. There's
Yes.
a difference between taking on a lot of work for an undescribed amount of time versus working and making your campaign and your intentions known with your leadership to start taking on those things because it's more of a means to an end to get there versus just let me take on my manager's job.
Yes.
So it's getting very clear on what those competencies are and starting to look at more of the soft skill element of it. Of course, there's a hard skill element of it where you do have to exhibit the work and do the work, but starting to carry some of those things even where you are today. Now, skip levels are a possibility because there are some people that are like, maybe I was brought in the organization at a lower level. It is possible to be skip level too. And so I think it's more so just saying, can I get to the next level? Can I do this? And the rest takes care of itself, provided you're in a company. So I should say that too, that often skips levels if that has happened to you. But it is important to start looking at and observing patterns between fast trackers because every organization has them. That's the person that has the LinkedIn lines every year, or starting to look at how long is it taking this person? Because I do truly believe, Jill, past a certain level, position mastery can be achieved in a year. But it also depends on, your company and if they want you to earn your stripes. There's a lot of people on the wait list for leadership and all
Yeah.
those things. So it's important to get to know that stuff and work with HR and your leadership.
Yes, because there's fewer
Yeah.
roles at the top, more people going for them, and the size of the company
Yeah.
makes a difference too. And yeah, love that. Okay. Now that we just talked about rising up within your organization, what if you don't see a path forward in your organization? When is it time to leave?
I think there's a couple things. I think it's when you're not getting visibility anymore in your role. So I guess there's twofold. If you are doing everything you're supposed to be doing, you're going through chain of command, you're trying to get support from your leadership, but you're just not seeing the momentum. You're not getting the extra visibility projects. You're not able to start being in spaces with more decision makers. If you've sat longer than, I like to put a time frame on it, and I think it's dangerous to do that, but I still like to do it. To give you an idea, if you're actively working towards your promotion and you haven't seen anything happen in 18 to 24 months, after your known campaign has been shared to the point of 18 to 24 months and there's been no change. That's the first. But I think that the second is that there are times that it will take time to move on. And I can say that for my personal story, where in TA, it took years to move up because there were less roles. And I do think it's important to always consider your company's timeline, but your timeline should still take priority. And that's another good time to think about looking.
Yeah. Sometimes I hear, like I've done all the work, they told me to do all these things, and then now they've come up with some more. It's like they keep moving the goalpost, and
That's
that can be
another great
really,
one to, yeah.
yeah, that can be really frustrating for people. And so, yeah, and that can be that. I think that timeline of like saying, hey, I'm going to give this a shot internally, but if nothing is happening, I'm not going to keep going 3 or 4 years and waiting around, and because this is a
No,
hard decision. It's a very personal one, and it's very unique to each person's situation.
yeah.
But those are really great guidelines, I think.
Organizations give us a performance review every year. So you
Hmm.
should be considering doing the same and
Yeah.
measuring your time in that same cycle versus just I've seen people sit in their role for 5+ years waiting for a promotion.
Yes. Yeah. It's not coming if
Yeah,
you've been waiting that long.
it's not. It's not. And you're only setting yourself up to have to rework your internal scripting about worth and being ready the
Yeah.
longer you sit.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, how do you know when it's just moving up in career changes, like just interviewing for jobs and going for that? Or is it time to do your own leadership work, your own inner work?
Yeah. So I think that you should actively be looking for feedback at all times from the right trusted sources. You should be doing your own 360s or working with a coach to get that information. And it's important for you to always think about the things that you should be working on. And if there's still a gap there, that is an indicator that you probably do need to stay in your role a little bit longer and manage those things, right? But if it's time for you to start looking for a role, I do believe that it's a matter of you've done those things and it's still not coming to you. But I do believe that and we talked about this earlier, that it's always important to prioritize your leadership development first before looking for a job. Because every unique job,
Yeah.
Jill, is an opportunity for you to become Jill or April 2.0 or 3.0
Yes.
or 4.0. So it's important because what I've seen in my career is that people are pegged hypo in that first sometimes 3 to 6 months.
Hmm.
And so that's why the 30, 60, 90 is a critical path for you when you're starting a new role.
Yeah. And if you're not picked as one of those high
Yeah.
potential leaders, it can feel really, demoralizing. But yet, when you take the reins and do your own leadership work, I have seen clients experience at work dramatically change. Their manager all of a sudden becomes their biggest fan, and they start getting picked for all these projects that they were looked
Yep.
over for before. And it really, our own internal work can really shine through and change others' experiences of us. And
Yeah.
so I always recommend the same thing of do the work first and then look for the job
I
internally
agree.
or externally. So
I agree.
now, one of my last questions for you
Mhm.
is, how do you know when it really is education that you should go get versus coaching, and doing this leadership work that we were just talking about?
So, my view is that most roles, especially in like the US, Canada, UK, are going to require a bachelor's degree, especially if you're going after a leadership role. There are organizations that do prioritize pedigree. Some of them are like the big four in accounting, or if you're going to a FANG or a MANG, they
Mm-hmm.
may require a bachelor's degree. But since we're all not working there, it's thinking about, okay, what organization am I going to? But as you survey those organizations, are you seeing the extra education as people? Are you seeing patterns? Because patterns don't lie. So are you seeing patterns of people who are in senior manager and above? Do they only have a bachelor's? Do they have a master's?
Yeah.
I am a big fan of additional education, just not for the sole purpose of getting promoted though. It's
Mm,
it's not the best marker. It's not I haven't seen it be the best ROI.
yeah.
And I've seen people get it prematurely where they're extremely overeducated and they're undertitled. They might still even be in
Yeah.
an analyst or a coordinator role and they have a PhD. And there's nothing wrong with it, but I think there's everything wrong with it when you're financing it, hoping that you come out of the program as this transformed person. And while education is certainly valuable, the institution you go to is really valuable too. When you think about, okay, well, I want to build a bigger network. Well, you're not going to probably do that at a University of Phoenix online. So it's
Right.
thinking about the school that you go to so you can at least do that as well. But the thing about school is always remember, maybe it gets you a seat at the table at companies that appreciate the pedigree. But for other organizations, think about, your positioning. MBAs do not position you for leadership roles. They do position you from a theory perspective, but doing it and experience is always going to trump that.
You have to have both.
Yeah.
You can't. Yeah, it's definitely both. I know my MBA opened up a lot of doors for me, and I had a great ROI on it, but I went back to school really late. I was 34 when I went back to school.
So you experienced
And
it different because you paired it.
I sure did. And I understood why they were teaching me everything that they were teaching me, which is a big difference. I think I got a lot more from my degree because of that. And while that's not a path for everyone, it really worked for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you bring up a good point, because there's so many people that go directly from bachelor's to master's degree, and they're not really maximizing the value from it because they're still not at a level in their career where they can pair some of that theory along with it. So I recently saw an article that Harvard MBA grads are struggling to find work. I think the other thing to add here too is to make sure that you're staying up on current events to see the valuation of a degree in the markets that you're in, because it could shift. You know, a while ago, even when I was in school, they were extremely valuable. Now I'm seeing experience trump additional education. And then now that we are moving into this different time, even politically, it could become valuable again. So it's also important to think about that too.
Yeah. And a 6-week coding boot camp can do a whole lot for you that, that degree may not be able to do. So
Exactly.
I think we're in a time when we really have to look at these things and see what that ROI is going to be for us, because education is so expensive now. We can't make that decision lightly.
It is. I only wish when I was going to school that more companies paid for education the way they do now.
Yeah.
So never be so in a rush that you take out this huge FAFSA loan when maybe you can also work on the degree one class at a time because of the reimbursement.
Yeah, right. Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for this discussion today. This discussion is so valuable to everybody who has listened. Again, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
If you're ready to fully lean into your feminine leadership and get promoted from director to vice president and beyond, hit that subscribe button so you'll get all the episodes to come. And check out the recommended video here to see how women are rising up without playing by the old rules that built these male-dominated industries and systems.